Cindy, great to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
Why don't we start with an introduction on what you are working on?
Yeah, good. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Quin, which is a digital therapeutic focused on self-management of diabetes. So we're 100% focused on the 24 by 7 needs of an individual, starting with the fact 99% of diabetes care is self-care, done by the individual when they're away from their doctor and living their day-to-day life. And that is a lifelong learning journey. People are making hundreds of decisions a day about things that most of us just take for granted. So, can I eat this now? Can I get in the car and drive? Can I go into this meeting without passing out? Just kind of the basics of day to day life. There's just layer on layer of uncertainty about everything from activity to sleep to stress to menstruation and everything else in between. Lots of things going wrong, lots of ups and downs just in day to day life. And so, what we do is take data from diabetes devices and phones, and we build up these complex, rich models of personal behavior and physiology and psychology. And then we use that to curate hyper personalized education. So, how does this drug behave in my body, for example? Support, so picking people up when all the different things go wrong, and guidance. So, how much insulin should I take for this burger, for example? And we provide that education and support and guidance based upon each individual's personal past experiences. So it's not, general medical knowledge with some patient data around the edges. It's for you personally. How do you behave and respond and react to all these different stimuli that affect your blood glucose, and kind of how can we guide you through it? So we're all about empowering people with knowledge and confidence and better well-being to
Mm.
achieve better health outcomes. And we've been live in the UK for over a year, in the US since November of last year. We're seeing extraordinarily high engagement rates. 20% of our users are using 15 days or more a month. That's very high for health apps. It's very, very high for diabetes apps. And 5 to 10% improvements in time and range, which is kind of the critical healthcare metric that gets tracked in this space. And so yeah, we're really excited about, being able to, really engage people through the day-to-day life and journey, the cognitive and the psychological load of living with the condition. And then in doing that, being able to help them to improve their health outcomes.
hmm I think the something very interesting you touch upon was that each individual is different. So you would need different data sources and maybe different outcomes for each person.
Yeah. Mhm.
Having said that, can you walk us through how you started?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started
Well,
the business.
what gave you the idea, and then
Yeah.
maybe what did you do when you had
Yeah.
the idea?
Yeah. 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 So I started 7 years ago now, a little over that, along with the co-founder. She's now gone on to do her PhD, but she'd been living with diabetes for 20 plus years at the time that we started. And she's the one who really clued me into the just day in, day out, relentless nature of self management of the condition. And so we set the company up really around that, thinking, well, okay, how can we use these things, phones and all the wearable consumer grade devices out there to kind of help to alleviate some of the cognitive and psychological load. So we set up really around that, and we spent first year really working out of the British Library here in London, and just interviewing, speaking to people with diabetes. We quickly worked out that what we needed to create was a medical device, and so then we had to work out kind of the regulatory strategy and pathway for how we would get it cleared. And then we raised a little bit of money and developed an MVP and put it out there. And it was wrong. And then we had to do yet another iteration. So we're actually on, I always say Quin is really three companies. The first two have failed, and the third one is now really working. And we've kind of landed on some very clear sets of insights to build around where we can really move the needle. There's 3,000 apps for people with diabetes, so there certainly isn't a need for yet another app to log and record every last thing you've been doing and sit down on a weekly or monthly basis, maybe with your doctor, and review it and see if you can learn something from it. That is what the world of diabetes apps has really been about. And we never set out to do that, but really kind of working out, well, what can we do with algorithms and data, consumer devices to really help to just make life a little bit easier and improve health outcomes. And, that's where we are now.
Mm. So it sounds like the problem was always the same, but then the execution took three different products to
Yeah.
came to the right moment. What was the first MVP you created?
The first MVP was much more heavily focused around the question of insulin dosing. How much insulin should I take and when? And that's really a question that no one, even a doctor, can't answer exactly. It's going to be, there's some very general kind of guidelines about what to take for, and when. But, then you have to really figure it out. Everybody's biochemistry is unique to them. Everybody's biochemistry is constantly changing. And so you really have to figure out what works for you, and it's a lot of guesswork, it's a lot of trial and error and experimentation. And so we were really looking at, well, how can we really make that trial and error easier? How can we help you recall what you've done in similar situations in the past and use that as a baseline then for tuning your for future decisions? And that was a great idea, and we did get some fair way down the path to implementing it. But then in doing that, we really saw that there's something else much bigger kind of lurking, in the background that needed to be addressed. And that's really the mental health aspects of managing diabetes. So if you think about like the world of diabetes management and care is all set up around directing people to get good blood glucose results. So you've kind of got this target range you're trying to keep yourself in. And if you don't have diabetes, you kind of just run along in that range. If you do have it, you're doing this basically. And you're given all kinds of tools and technologies to kind of try to keep yourself within that range. And the reality is, even with all the technology we have available today, and there's a lot of exciting stuff out there, 80% of people still don't achieve that target, basically, that target range. So it's a massive failure rate, really. And so you're now in this state where you're constantly failing to achieve, and you become, really quite distressed. There's now a condition or a emotional response to this called diabetes distress. Basically, it's the response to all the things that are going wrong constantly as you're trying to manage your blood glucose, and you're unable to do it. So you're now in this world where you're trying to get control. It's not working. You get distressed. Control gets worse. You get more distressed. Control gets worse. Basically, this vicious cycle is now set up with these kind of impossible targets that people are set out to meet. And so we saw that basically, and what we realized, and we saw that through really literally tens of thousands of hours with people with diabetes. So we've had a research program running around this for the last couple of years. It's also now being very highlighted and focused on in the world of diabetes care, diabetes distress. But what we saw was we have to actually turn this model on its head. We really need to be treating diabetes distress. And in doing that, people will get better health outcomes. And so that's really how we arrived at, okay, what's the causes of distress? Well, there's a tremendous lack of knowledge and understanding and, basic information available to people with diabetes about the drugs they're taking, about sleep, stress, menstruation, all these things which impact your blood glucose, some of which there is scientific research for, much of which there is not. So how can we fill in those gaps in education and make it personalized to you and relevant to you in a moment that you need it, not take Saturday off and spend 3 hours learning about carb counting, but really literally in this moment, what little piece of information that's got your data and your experiences filled in around it that could help you with an insight that you might need that would maybe intrinsically motivate you to do something differently, to change something about your management that could
Mm.
help you. And so it's like, that's how we arrived at the kind of education and just the basic ongoing support, the need to just help people stay motivated, not feel alone on this journey. And there's isolation is a huge problem. And then the decision-making guidance is still there. So helping people with, the trial and error and the experimentation, which is constant and ongoing. But that's kind of how we arrived at that stuff needs to be geared at alleviating distress. And then what we've seen in the months now that we've had the product out there that's targeting that is that people actually get better health outcomes. And that really ties up with the scientific research as well. So as I said, doctors are now, and clinicians like in practice are now actually, well, there's been a lot of research that connects distress and outcomes, and now people are actually starting to screen for distress and starting to treat it in a way that it can improve outcomes. So that's been kind of the big aha insight that's really kind of allowed us to, kind of open up the gates and really make a real meaningful difference for, a
Mhm,
lot of people.
mhm. Can you give me the foundations of diabetes? What does it mean? What should the levels of your glucose be, and then what about your insulin? What does it really mean? What's the correlation
Yeah,
between them?
yeah, yeah. So basically, diabetes is an umbrella term for a symptom of chronic high blood glucose. So your blood glucose is high and you got to do something to manage it. So that's diabetes, the umbrella. And then there's two smaller umbrellas underneath that, still very big, called type 1 diabetes and type 2. Type 1 diabetes is your body is not making enough insulin or not making insulin at all. And so therefore your blood glucose is high. So insulin is basically the hormone that docks on your cells and allows them to open up and eat the glucose out of your blood. So you've eaten some food, your body's turned it into, digested it and turned it into all the stuff it's needed. Some of that is glucose that's now running around in your system, and it basically needs to come out and get into your muscles, and so your body can actually use it. It's how you get energy, basically. And so insulin is needed for your body to take that sugar out of your blood. And if you're not making it or not making enough of it, you need to take it. And so that gets diagnosed as type 1. Sometimes it gets diagnosed as type 2, which is where this all gets confusing. Type 2 is basically your body isn't using that insulin properly. So you're creating insulin, but somehow things are blocking it from being effective. And that could be any number of different things. So we're talking about the endocrine system. So diabetes is a disease of the endocrine system. This is 80 different hormones, tissues, and organs, all these long-running chain reactions that are, happening. And that's what the outcome is, your blood glucose. That's the result of that, basically. And so you've got this incredibly complex system. You've got one signal you're measuring, which is glucose. And if it's too high, something's wrong in that system. And it gets diagnosed as type 1 or type 2, depending upon what they can see. I mean, you can already see of that description of type 1 and type 2, you could have both those conditions. Your body could be making insulin, and it could be not using, or could be not making enough insulin and not using it well as well. So there's all kind, and research in the last couple of decades has shown there's subtypes of type 1 and type 2. And so there's a whole, this is all very much ongoing. Diabetes is a very complex condition. And a lot is known, but a lot more needs to be known. Like many people will say, like, I'm living with the disease and no one understands, or my kid is living with the disease and no one understands. And, that is how it's experienced by the individual. So that's the kind of setup for what it is. And then what you need to do now is run this endocrine system and control this blood glucose outcome result. And so there's kind of two major metrics that get tracked in the industry: time and range, which is like this range. And so how much, if you don't have diabetes, it's running along, but if you do, it's doing something like that. And so how much time do you spend with it in what's called a safe range, or what doctors would say would be a safe range? And that'd probably be the same, it's not probably, it's sort of like a normal person's blood glucose, give or take, basically. And then the other key measurement is called HbA1c, which is basically the average of your blood glucose over a 3 or 6 month period. So it's an indication of like, well, how well have things gone in the last 3 months? And really, like, do we need to take action? Do we need to think about changing your treatment? Are you at risk of future complications? Glucose is a huge molecule that's now running around in your blood all over the place, running through your little capillaries in your eyes, scraping things. I mean, it causes all kinds of, kidney damage and, renal failure, all kinds of different follow-on conditions. So there's kind of those two metrics that are sort of paid attention to and watched very carefully, rightly. But if you think about it, this complex system, that glucose result is really just one of many outcomes produced by that system. And it's the thing that gets paid attention to and tracked. And so everyone gets geared and focused in on, tracking that. But the reality is it's just so complex that it's not possible. I mean, it's 80% of people, as I said, don't achieve the target HbA1c. I mean, that's an extraordinarily high rate of failure. And there's really no other industry where we accept that level of failure, but that's kind of the situation that we're in right now. And so people are given the tools to manage it as best they can. So that could be a continuous glucose monitoring device, so something you wear that kind of continuously, is measuring glucose levels. Most people don't have that device. That's not funded most places in the world. And so people are sticking their finger and, putting some blood on a finger stick meter and, taking one-off readings, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 times a day. If they're lucky, because those strips are also expensive and unaffordable for most people. And so, people have to ration in that way. So that's how you measure your blood glucose. And then if you need insulin, you're going to basically, either have what's called an insulin pump device, which you're wearing on your body. And you're going to use some medical formula to say, okay, how many units, I'm going to eat 25 grams of carbs you have some mathematical ratio that you use to say, okay, that translates into 2.5 units of insulin, and you take 2.5 units of insulin, and or you adjust it for, but I'm going to go for a run, or but I didn't sleep well last night, but I ate a big plate of pasta for lunch, but I'm stressed out, but I'm angry at my spouse. All these things which also impact, and then you're going to adjust your dosing based upon all of those different things that are going on in your life at that moment. So it's an incredibly complex system with some very simplified measurements. Glucose basically is a summary of everything that's happened in the endocrine system in the last 24 hours. Insulin, a long-lasting drug with lagging effects, and so not an exact science at all. And so you start with these basic ratios that you get given, medical formulas, and then you just tune it to what you learn about your own body and what you know is going on for you in that particular day.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds pretty difficult because let's just assume that you don't have a glucose monitor that is measuring
Mhm.
all the time, right? How would you know what's the dosage and what are the right things to do?
Yeah, you're basically gonna measure, like you're gonna sit down to eat, you're gonna measure your blood glucose, you're gonna see where you're at, and you're gonna look at what you're gonna eat. I mean, you may look at where you're at and say, I'm not gonna eat because I'm just way too high. And if I put this in, I'm gonna go so high, I don't wanna deal with it. I can't deal with it right now for whatever reason. So, but yeah, and you're just gonna make a guess. And usually people, if they have access to testing strips, will test 2 hours later, because
Mm.
that's usually, it's called the postprandial rise. So you're going to eat, you are going to go high. You just are, even if you're taking the right exact amount of insulin that's needed for that food. You're going to go high, and then you're going to come down again. And so usually what people are recommended to do, and that's if they're in a market where they're funded to be able to do that, is check their glucose in 2 hours and see where they are, and then make a decision. Am I still too high? Or maybe I'll take a little bit more insulin, or maybe I'll wait it out and check again in 30 minutes and see if I need more insulin. And you just, it's a guessing game. It's a guessing game anyway, even if you have the continuous signal, because you don't know what it's going to do in the future. Because you can make me angry right now, and that could cause my blood glucose to go high. So you can't predict everything about the future to be able to exactly predict what your blood glucose is going to be and what it's going to
Mm.
do. And
Mm.
that's why we always say it's got to be the individual has to be involved in this decision, because like better than anyone else, I'm planning to go to the gym this afternoon, or I'm going to go to the birthday party this evening, or I'm going to go to the pub after work. And so you need to be able to think about, okay, that's coming in my future, that's going to impact my blood glucose. So if I'm sitting here right now knowing I'm going to go on a walk in 2 hours and I'm high, I actually might just wait and not take any insulin, because I know
Yeah.
that walk is going to bring me back down into a
You just mentioned something I've never heard before. If someone gets angry, is there a chance for the glucose to go higher?
can be. Yeah, it depends on the person, but yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Why is this happening? What's the mechanism here?
Well, I mean, again, it's hormonal, right? So it's like your body is doing, all kinds of different things when you're getting to a heightened states of cortisol, stress, adrenaline. These things
Right. So the
they're
cortisol
all
breaks
a
to
part of,
okay.
yeah, the function of your I mean, it's like they're all involved in all these long running chain reactions that are going on across your body all the time, which also affect what your blood glucose
Mm.
is. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, that's very
Yeah.
interesting. And then you created the first MVP, then the second MVP, and now at the third stage, you came solving this problem in a much better way. Once you stumble upon this problem and upon this iteration, what did you have to do?
Mm. We, I mean, we pretty much rebuilt the product from scratch.
Mhm.
So, and I mean, all what we do anyway, but we really did it in an even more accelerated level, was a ton of research. Like, really, so all these sets of hypotheses we have, we realized like this is a mental health issue that we're dealing with here. Like, we need to really understand like what is behind the diabetes distress, basically. And then once we had some kind of hypothesis about that, then there's a whole new set of hypotheses to discover underneath that, basically. Our app became much more education oriented, so much more about filling in, which we were surprised about, but people taking insulin 10, 20 years actually don't know, often are never taught about or told about, or maybe they were 10 years ago, about how that drug behaves. And
Mm.
so it's like basically pulling together relevant small bite-sized pieces of education that we can put out and that kind of stuff. It became much more kind of content oriented than it was before. And also, I guess, just sort of acknowledge, kind of much more straight ahead, and acknowledging like this isn't an exact science, like things are going to go wrong, this app is here to actually help you to just deal with the uncertainty of it. So a lot of times when you come to diabetes technology, and even in the clinical context, like people present things as if they're more known and certain than they
Right.
are. And just being really upfront, this time around, of just sort of that's just not the case. And um, this tool is about helping you to manage the uncertainty that comes with it. So we're not going to guarantee you that there is no uncertainty and that things aren't going to go wrong, but we're going to be there as a, companion to help you, you know, deal with it,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
basically, once I sign up for Quinn, then what do I get as a user?
Yeah. So you basically go to the App Store, download, and there's quite a lot kind of on screening steps on the way in. So this is a regulated medical device, so it's made with a particular intended purpose and an audience in mind. And so we unfortunately can't serve everybody right now. So it kind of narrows it down to people at this point who are taking insulin, using insulin pens, so injecting several times a day with an insulin pen device, and it can be people who have continuous glucose monitoring devices like a Dexcom or a Libra, and we get the data obviously there from the Terra platform. Um, or it could be people who are using finger stick meters. And so we're kind of like set you up, and then basically we just start learning about you. And so with every piece of information we ask from you, we give back some kind of value. So it's not a give us all your life, give us all your life's data, record every last minute of everything that you're doing. It's a very high level, light touch, like record only what you want. And we try to give you value back for everything that you record. And if you decide actually, no, it's not enough value, then we're not asking you for, we can give you a value commensurate with what you will put in, basically. And so, yeah, we just start going. We always say 3 minutes a day for 3 weeks, and we built up kind of enough of a base of understanding of you and who you are that we can actually start to give some, um, reasonable guidance and support in terms of like understanding patterns around your food and your, different things that you're doing in your day to day. And honestly, the biggest thing that keeps people on and with us for that period of time is insights around their insulin and their dosing, and how they think about insulin. Your insulin's a long acting drug. It lasts anywhere from 0 to 5 to 24 hours, and it has a profile, so it's going to be like really, really strong for the first, well, do nothing for the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then it's going to be strong for a while, and then it's going to start fading off, and then it's going to 5 hours later kind of be tailing off. And that's critical to know, is you've got this 5-hour drug in your system lowering your blood glucose. You're not thinking about that's what you did at 7 a.m. when it's 11 a.m. That's already gone and passed. But if you took insulin at 7 a.m., it's still there with you and it is impacting you. And so helping people to really consider that and think about it, and kind of giving them insights into how they're taking their insulin, and what they have on board already in what phases of the acting cycle, so that they can make good decisions around whether or not to take more.
Hmm.
If they're
And as a
very much.
business decision, why did you focus on the type 1 diabetics instead of the type 2?
Well, initially, actually, because I started the business with someone who has been living with type 1 for 20 plus years now. But we also, and so we had kind of the deep under subject matter expertise and understanding, but also because it's such a targetable problem. It's not the self management load of a day in, day out of a type 1 diabetes is incredible, and it hasn't even been touched in terms of problem solving and studying and really looking at, well, what can be done to actually alleviate this. And so we just felt like there was so many unmet needs in that kind of category, and so much available in terms of data sources and data points, and not even, yeah, I guess I would say even in data sources and data points in the context of being able to personalize something and really understand, well, what does this person need, how can we really help them, how can we really offload. And so we just saw it as a great problem to solve. And then we felt like if we could solve it in type 1 for a subset, then a bigger subset of type 1, and that we could actually then move from there into type 2, which is actually what we're doing now. So our next version of our product is focused very much on um, beyond just insulin
Hmm.
usage.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then when you go beyond insulin, what changes? What are the type 2 diabetics going to get?
Yeah, it's still the same product concept. It's really understanding, where is this person at in their life? where are they in their diabetes life, what do they want to change, what do they want to, what are they willing to look into or not, because it's like so many people you'll find when you work in this business, in this area, it's just like diabetes is not my goal in life. That is what a lot of people will tell you, or something to that effect. I mean, it can just take over. And if it can take over and you can still be in the 80% failure category. I mean, you can just really work so hard on this and have all of your time be about controlling your blood sugar and still, be unsuccessful with it. And so um, for us, it was about, okay, how can we learn about where you are in your life and what you really want to do, what's going to make sense for you, and just help you with small things like quick wins. Get a hold of, get you out. First of all, break the cycle of the distress. So bad results to stress, bad results to stress, and kind of break that cycle and give you just a little bit of headspace to tackle one thing. And then through tackling that one thing, giving you a chance to experience a win, and feeling like, yeah, okay, that went well. Maybe I'll try the next thing and the next thing. And so it's all about really figuring out who you are, what you want to do, and kind of breaking the negative cycle that you probably are in, and then giving you a chance to feel, like, yeah, this is. I mean, our the feeling we want people to have is like, yeah, okay, I got this. I can actually manage this. It's not hopeless, which is kind of where a lot of people are when they come to us. And so it's the same kind of concept, and then you just have to weigh in. Okay, the treatment approaches, the medication that people are given are very different. So if you're taking insulin, that's as I mentioned, a long-lasting drug with, a variable pharmacodynamics that needs to be managed. If you're taking metformin or Januvia or any other GLP-1s, all kinds of other medications, that's going to have a very different effect on you and your life. But it's a major part of the self-management equation, and it needs to be treated differently, basically, from the user's perspective.
Hmm. And then once you launched, how did you go about finding the first few customers?
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a research program, so we really have had hundreds of people co-creating with us. We've been releasing on every 3 to 4 weeks a new version of the product and taking feedback and all of that. So we had to build that up. We recruited on social media, so Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and kind of all the places you would have expected. Actually, TikTok wasn't really there at the time, so it was more Facebook and Instagram. And then when we were ready to fully launch, we of course had learned, quite a lot about it. We had been building up a bit of a social presence, it was a mixture of a bit of paid acquisition. It was quite a lot of organic. We spent a lot of work on content creation and generation that got placed. We had significant. Have a significant influencer program. So people who are, kind of micro influencers are known in one way or another. Also, using and trying and working, so that kind of stuff. So it's just a mixture of really multi-channel marketing
Hmm.
strategy, to just bring people onto the platform.
So
We've had over 40,000 downloads.
micro influencers. So who would go after these people? Would you go yourself at the beginning, finding the right people? Would you have a social media company doing that work? Who was going
We
after?
we did it. Yeah. Our marketing team did it. So we just basically, I mean, we're all listening all the time to what's going on in every angle of diabetes, whether it's people with diabetes or whether it's industry or whether it's medical and research, and kind of we're just constantly scanning and aware of what's going on out there, and then interacting and engaging with people. Yeah.
Mm, mm. And then you mentioned that you raised a little bit of money at the beginning. What was your approach in raising funds?
Mm. The first round we did was friends and family. So it was really, the good old fashioned two girls in a garage. Isabel and I had worked together in a prior company. And so we had some kind of mutual friend sets there, but it was, pretty much friends and family. And that was kind of what allowed us to get to the first release of a product. It actually got us to a CE marked product, in fact. So we completed our regulatory with that and built our quality management system around that. And then from there, kind of once we had that initial sort of proof of concept out there, we raised yet another tranche, which would then allow us to hire up a fuller team and be able to expand into a larger kind of research program, which was where we started to recruit hundreds of people to help us with the co-creation of it and kind of move from there. So we've raised, I think it's over 5 rounds now, 5 million US. But it's all been kind of just smaller milestones and tranches along the way. We've had the same angels of like same 5 angels sort of with us across all of those rounds. We also have some Innovate UK government grant funding as well in there. So it's been a mixture of angels and grant, really.
That's pretty interesting. So you would go after, so basically the same angels invested in multiple rounds.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. So for someone that starts today, how do you approach these people? How do you find them, and then what's the best way
Mhm.
to get in front of them and speak to them?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I mean, our angels all pretty much all came from our own networks. We have one angel group who invested in us called E100, and it was a group of people from that group invested in us as private individuals, not as a group overall. But the rest of it has really come from just personal networks and telling the story and getting people bought into it. We have a few people who are high net worth with type 1 diabetes, so very familiar with the domain that we're working in and looking to solve in. So it's just been a mixture. And, I think that doesn't help someone who's kind of looking to start out today if they don't already have that network. But probably one of the biggest things that I've learned in all my years of business, and I was doing, as a managing director in a very, not very large, but a large tech company prior to this, it's just investing in your networks and connecting and knowing people matters. And you don't know why it matters when you're doing it, but down the line, it makes a big difference to
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
getting the support and the resources and the how and the advice and the mentoring that you're going to need to make it
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. Perfect. And then I think that in this space, CGMs changed a lot of this game because you could
Mhm.
all the time now. Basically, it's not all the time. It's maybe every 5 minutes or every 15 minutes, depending on what sensor you
Mhm.
are wearing. But I think it pretty significantly changed your understanding about glucose,
Yeah.
because I usually used to compare this with what we had before, right?
Mhm.
I remember going um, to a chemist to do an analysis, and if they wanted to see your glucose profile, they would give you some sugar to digest, and then
Mhm.
every 5 minutes for 30 minutes they would get some blood and
Mhm.
see how your glucose changed. Whereas now
Yeah.
you can just wear a small CGM sensor, then you can measure all the
Yeah.
time and you don't feel it that much. And in
Mhm.
general, I think this is a pretty interesting direction because the more real time data you get, the more input you get, and the more of a better understanding we get about the human body. But how did CGMs work for you? Do you think that they play a vital role today, or are we not there yet?
There's certainly an important advancement in diabetes technology. Being able to continue, most people with diabetes will tell you, many will tell you it's a game changer, it's a life changer, it's really just made things so much better for them. Many will also tell you that they're exhausted from seeing what their glucose is all the time and constantly like looking at their thing and thinking about, do I need to change? So it also comes with a mental load and a fatigue as well. But I think there's no doubt that it's make CGM makes a big difference for people. But I think we also have to remember, like, knowing what your blood glucose is one thing. Steering it and controlling it is an entirely different question, because even if, I mean, it's a summary of everything that's happened in your endocrine system in the last 24 hours, that reading that you have. Now there's everything that's going to happen in the next forward period that you can't predict that is going to impact your blood glucose. And so there still is a significant human load to be able to think about, okay, I know what that is right now, but what's it going to be in the future? And so much of diabetes technology investment is going into predicting that signal better. It's like all the CGM makers and many others are basically trying to build better and better algorithms that predict that signal, and they'll predict it 30 minutes out, an hour out. And the accuracy of their predictions, if you go to any diabetes tech conference, there's a real strong focus on predicting that signal. Um, and and the other area of investment is on automating the insulin delivery. So then it's like, if we can predict the signal and then you're wearing an insulin pump device, then we can automatically inject the right amount of insulin. And soon enough, the human is out of the loop and not involved in the decision making. Basically, you just have these really smart algorithms, which are basically predicting and delivering and predicting and delivering and predicting and delivering insulin, basically. So that's kind of where, the majority of diabetes tech innovation gets focused right now. I think the challenge with that is, as I've mentioned, this system is very complicated. So it can happen, but we're 10 years, 20 years away from that happening. That the complete no human in the loop diabetes management. And there are many people who have hacked together their own versions of this. It's called DIY or closed loopers that are basically. So there's lots and lots of people focused on this. Now, if you say there's lots and lots of people, but we say there's 40 million people who are taking insulin, it's not 40 million people who are ever going to get access to those devices. And so what you have is basically, when you do have those devices, you still have the diabetes distress, emotional, mental, cognitive load, which needs to be addressed. And then you have also the added challenge that most people will never get access to those devices. I mean, we're a long way away from a world where everyone has a CGM device, and let alone a pump or an automated, insulin delivery system. And so I think the challenge is for us, for us in our world is to, okay, well, how do we actually keep looking at this problem and saying, yes, all these advancements do help, but the distress is still there. The mental load of this condition is still there, and it's going to be there for a long time, even for the people who have the latest and greatest. And there are many people who are never going to get the latest and greatest. And how can we continue to kind of help support those people? So it's important technology. It's important advances. It's made life a lot better for a few million of the 40 million people in type 1. And, forget type 2. It's not even funded in most places in type 2. And I think we're a long way away from it getting funded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's still a need to solve the other self-management problems around it. Self-management is not reduced to predicting glucose and automating insulin delivery. It's still all the other decisions that are there. Yeah.
Right. I think it usually follows the process of innovation that you get a hardware device to come into the market, but then, okay, let's just say that you measure your glucose, your glucose, then there is just a lot of education that needs to go through that. Every person that has diabetes do not necessarily understand what does the glucose mean and how the glucose changes. So you have to go through a lot of learning by yourself or learning from your doctor to better understand what you need to be doing. So I guess it's a first step of understanding better. You have the data, but then you need to educate the people with certain apps, with certain, it's just thousands of ways to do that. So it's just a small first step that is good enough for a first step.
It's a great first step. Absolutely. I mean, it's something that, and CGM will get cheaper and more widely available and all of these things. So it will continue to grow and must continue to grow. Actually, it is, it is life-changing for most people who use it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, it's the beginning, not the end.
Mm-hmm. If you could have another sensor that measures something, a biomarker or something that would really help in this, what would that sensor be? What's a signal you would be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, there are, as I'm sure you're aware, like a lot of sensors who are looking for multi-analyte sensing, basically, and they're looking at adrenaline and cortisol and amylin and any number. So to me, it's like really any of the hormones that are involved in the regulation of blood glucose would be very interesting to be observed. Hormone levels that would be very interesting to be observed. So, I think any of those, ketones is probably, it is one that more and more people are kind of looking at and going after. So, for us, it's sort of like the signals are interesting and they should be factored in, but we more look at, okay, how does this actually translate into this individual life, into something actionable? You can see, your activity and that you've been active, but like, what does that mean for you? And so it's more about how do you translate these signals. You can see someone has their menstrual cycle. What does that actually mean in the context of managing your blood glucose? And so we're kind of ready for, any number of different streams of signals, but more factored into the context of like, well, what is this person, what what are they challenged by in their self-management? And how can we help them with that? And signals can help, but you really have to really more deeply understand the individual and kind of what the emotional context, I guess, behind what it is that's troubling them.
Hmm. If we touch a bit on nutrition and maybe training as well, when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, what's something that works in this context? I hear a lot about ketogenic diets, for example, where basically you reduce the carbohydrates level to zero
Mm-hmm.
and technically the glucose levels.
Mm-hmm.
Um, does something like this work or not?
It works for some people. I mean, that's the thing is we have to remember, like, it's incredibly complex condition. Everyone's biochemistry is unique to them. Whatever is broken in your endocrine system could be different than what's broken in mine and broken in someone else's. And so that it could work. And also some people could just be not in cultures where carbs get eaten that much. And so it's like, okay, it's not hard for me to cut carbs. And I have the kind of diabetes that, this thing actually works for. So, I mean, and I think you do see that like in I think Verta is probably the best example. They've had recent studies released that show, a lot of success really on their platform. And a lot of it is about a keto diet, basically. And keto can work for, a lot of people. I think there's not enough research into the long-term effects and complications related to keto. So that needs to be looked into. But yeah, it can work. But I think that's the problem in diabetes is like there's no one size fits all. There's no one solution that says if we all do this, then we're going to get this result. And we've got to remember, people are people. They're not just diabetes patients, So it's, that's not, feasible, viable, or desirable to do keto for a lot of people. And so, yeah, we just have to look at solutions that work and try to, be as personalized as we can in the approaches. I mean, you still need to stratify at some level just to get started with technologies and solutions. So you got to find ways to say, okay, these kind of people could respond well to this kind of a solution. Let's put that together. And there's a ton of research around that, basically stratifying and saying, what's going to work with whom. And that needs to continue. But I think the more and more personalized that we can get with the therapies, and that's something that digital and data and algorithms allows us to do, really. I mean, if you think about what we've done in gaming and social media to really get to know a person and place an ad in front of them, that's like exactly what I mean. That we know, those companies know a lot about us. Those technologies have been, whether we like it or not, very smart in personalizing things for us. And I think we've not even begun to do that really in the health space. Certainly not in diabetes and chronic conditions more generally, but in health across the board. There's so much more we can do with technology to really understand who is this person, not patient, but person. What do they need? How can we support them where they are in their life, in the life that the condition that they're living in, and put the right kinds of solutions in front of them. And it's going to be different for everybody, and that's so hard.
Yep.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
guess it's it's an engineering question as well. It's the
Mhm.
more data you have and the more hardware
Mhm.
devices you get, the
Yeah.
more understanding you're going to have to the problem, and then you would need to create many feedback loops in order to
Mhm.
test, iterate, and learn how each individual's
Mhm.
body reacts, which is different
Yeah.
in each person, and then give them a
Mhm.
very personalized recommendation, which is so
Mhm.
much different of what we're used for the last 20 years, isn't it?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, and that is what you're seeing, like all these different metabolic companies and platforms, like understanding for you personally, how does this food affect you? How does that affect you? How does this exercise affect you? That kind of thing. So, we can definitely um, go a lot further in that, but I think we can also do it at the psychological, like the person. I mean, what is this person's personality? Are they somebody who's super achievement oriented, or someone who's a bit more relaxed? Are they somebody? How do you, I mean? One of the big things we look at, particularly in diabetes, is how can we personalize and do patient-led engagement with your healthcare team, basically. So helping the individual understand, who are all these people in my healthcare team? What could I use them for? What do I want out of them? What are my goals in working with this team of people? How do I want to be approached and handled and treated in a conversation? Am I somebody who needs much more sort of emotional support versus like, let's sit down and look at, numbers for 8 minutes and, and pick on specific things, and really, really personalizing it to that level kind of help, like, so dealing more with the kind of emotional, mental side of things, in addition to, okay, how does your body react to this particular food? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And then just last question from me.
Mm-hmm.
It's where is Queen in 5 years?
Mm. Yeah. We are definitely, as I mentioned already, we're expanding now beyond type 1 into type 2. And, we see our approach is all about, okay, self-management of a condition is a lifelong learning journey. And it requires skills and education and knowledge and personal understanding and motivation and support through that journey. And how can we use data and algorithms and really good user experience, like really thoughtful user research and understanding and experience, to provide solutions for people who are self-managing chronic conditions, basically. So to help them through that lifelong learning journey. And so we see doing that type 1, more segments of type 1. We've not even begun to cover all the people there. Type 2 and several segments of type 2. I don't know if we'll be able to do everything well. And then moving into other chronic conditions down the line. And so I think in 5 years, we will certainly have done a very good pass at type 1 and type 2, and we'll be in a few others as well. And again, all about really self-management. So we're not talking, I think what we see in the industry right now is taking the existing care models around diabetes, around MSK, around, any name your chronic condition. And then people are looking to digitize that. And so we basically have taken the care models, which may or may not be working for individuals, and put digital stuff around that. We've not acknowledged the self-management load here. And so much of chronic condition management is self-management. And so really just going deep into that and empowering people to better manage on their own when they're away from their doctors, living their day-to-day life, which is where most of the care happens, and really going after that. So not virtual care solutions backed by doctors looking to digitize the healthcare system, but rather deep in the weeds, in the wild with that individual 24/7 as they're going through life, and actual life, not just patient life, but their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cyndi,
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for this podcast, and we
Yeah.
will speak soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.